Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. I don't know if you ever heard the true story of the first Thanksgiving. It's actually a hard story to find nowadays, even though it played such a pertinent role in the foundation of America. I first heard this story in economics class back in college. Principles of microeconomics. The year was 1620. The Pilgrims had made their way to America and were trying to find a better life. Instead, they went through 3 horrible years of starvation. Half of their population died or returned back to England. So their governor decided to try something new. Governor William Bradford of the Plymouth colony decided to scrap the socialist program that they had carried with them from Europe. Quote, one of the traditions the Pilgrims brought with them from England was something called, quote, farming in common. The colonists pooled the fruits of their labor and the harvest was rationed among them. The idea that, quote, the taking away of property and bringing them into common community was found to breed too much confusion and discontent and retard much employment that would have been to their benefit and comfort. Young and able men resented working hard for other men and their wives without any compensation. So after 3 winters of starvation, Bradford instituted a new policy when it came time to plant in the spring of 1623. He set aside a plot of land for each family, allowing each to plant, quote, for his own particular, and in that regard to trust to themselves, as written in the journal of Governor Bradford. For the colonists, the results were nothing short of miraculous. The women went willingly into the field, carrying their young children with them. Those who previously claimed to be too ill or weak to work were eager to till their own soil. Yet it was no miracle. Without knowing it, Bradford and the Pilgrims discovered what Eastern Europe learned the hard way more than 350 years later, and what America is perhaps slowly learning as we go down the slippery slope towards socialism currently. Deprived of property rights and lacking economic incentives to work, produce, and save, human beings behave in a predictable manner. They resort to laziness. Pretty soon the colonists had more than enough food for their own needs and started to trade the excess corn for other commodities such as furs. After 3 winters of famine, the Pilgrims viewed their time of plenty as a stroke of good fortune when they were merely responding to market signals. Economics. Even before there was an official market, the invisible hand was at work. Thanksgiving is a time to give thanks for our system of government, which allows the invisible hand to guide and protect us, as written in my college economics course. And they don't teach this stuff in school anymore, sadly. I later learned that Rush Limbaugh would tell this story and read the original text every Thanksgiving. So without further ado, I am going to replay Rush's story of the first Thanksgiving in his own words.
Collectivism. It was as costly and destructive to the Pilgrims as it is and has been to anybody who has ever tried it. So Bradford decided to scrub it. He threw it out and took bold action. He assigned a plot of land to each family. Every family was given a plot of land. They could work it, manage it however they wanted to. If they just wanted to sit on it, get fat, dumb, happy, and lazy, they could. If they wanted to develop it, if they wanted to grow corn, whatever on it, they could. If they wanted to build on it, they could do that. If they wanted to turn it into a quasi-business, they could do whatever they wanted to do with it. He turned loose the power of the capitalist marketplace. Long before Karl Marx was even born, long before Karl Marx was a sperm cell in his father's dreams, the Pilgrims had discovered and experimented with what could only be described as socialism, and they found that it didn't work. Now, it wasn't called that then, but that's exactly what it was. Everybody was given an equal share. And you know what happened? Nobody did anything. There was no incentive. Nothing worked. Nothing happened. What Bradford and his community found was that the most creative and industrious people had no incentive to work any harder than anybody else did, unless they could utilize the power of personal motivation. But while most of the rest of the world's been experimenting with socialism for over 100 years, longer now, trying to refine it, perfect it, reinvent it, the Pilgrims decided early on to scrap it permanently. What Bradford wrote about this experiment should be in every school child's history lesson. If it were, we might prevent so much suffering. We might have prevented this election if the true story of Thanksgiving had been taught. The Mayflower Compact, they wanted to be fair. They wanted everybody to have one common share of stock in everything that happened that the Pilgrims produced, and it bombed. It didn't work. There was no prosperity. There was no creativity because there was no incentive. Here's what Bradford wrote about the failure. For this community, so far as it was found to breed much confusion and discontent. They were not happy, in other words. This community was found to breed much confusion and discontent and retard much employment that would have been to their benefit and comfort. In other words, nobody worked. The way they set it up killed and discouraged work. There was no need. For young men that were most able and fit for labor and service, sat around and did nothing, should spend their time and strength to work for other men's wives and children without being paid for it. They said, why do that? So they didn't. It was thought to be injustice. Why should you work for other people when you can't work for yourself? What's the point? So you hear what he was saying here, folks? The Pilgrims found that people could not be expected to do their best work without some incentive. So what did they try? What did Bradford's Pilgrim community try next? They unharnessed the power of free enterprise. They invoked capitalism, the principle of private property, all the way back in the 1400s. It was incredible. Every family was assigned its own plot of land, and they could do with it whatever they wanted to do. Bradford wrote, this had very good success, for it made all hands industrious, so as much more corn was planted than otherwise would have been. So when profit was introduced, when the opportunity to prosper was introduced, it went gangbusters. That, my friends, is the essence of the true story of Thanksgiving. This is where it gets really good. If you're laboring under the misconception that I was taught in school, they set up trading posts, they exchanged goods with the Indians after they had enjoyed this prosperity. It was not the Indians that brought them prosperity, and it's not said to insult anybody. The Indians assisted them on their arrival, undeniably. But what led to prosperity for these original settlers was a discovery that the common store failed. Socialism didn't work when they introduced what turns out to be capitalism. They didn't have the name for it, but when they turned loose individual incentive, keep what you produce, sell what you don't need, they went crazy. This is not something they were taught by anybody but self-experience. It was not the Indians. None of this is said to put anybody down. Don't misunderstand.
So with that being said, happy Thanksgiving and cheers to the true story of Thanksgiving, which was key in making America great.